Raider Nation, what's good? Jesse Merrick here. We've got a bonus episode of the Silver and Black Sports Network podcast for you today. We're going to dive into who and what to watch out for in the preseason opener on Thursday night in Seattle against the Seahawks. Now, I wasn't planning on doing this since I touched on it a bit in the back half of the last episode, but I only mentioned a few guys, so I figured this would be something good for you guys and something you might be interested in as well. So with that, let's get into some of the quick hitters of what I'm looking for in the game up there in Seattle on Thursday. For starters, how about the starters? We told you Pete gave us a sort of non-answer on whether or not they would actually play. I do think that they do play, even though he doesn't usually play his starters much in the preseason. This is a totally new group and a new team, and his first year coaching them up as well. Plus, it's really the first and only opportunity for the starters to get a run through on the road before they do it for real against the Pats in week 1, right? So that's why I'm thinking they get out there. They likely won't play much against the 49ers, especially after a joint practice with them a day or so before the game as well. And that last preseason game is usually reserved for the guys fighting for roster spots. Starters don't usually play in that, at least in recent years. So I think we see him out there for a quick look. Outside of that, here is what I'm going to be watching with a lot of the other guys. We can't not include Ashton Jeanty on this list. I think he only plays a series or two with Geno and them, but you have to get your back out there and get him some hits, get him moving a little bit. And I think what he does is in limited action is really going to be intriguing. And if he pops one, that hype train might look more and more like a bullet train after the game. So let's see Ashton Jeanty do his thing. We've been talking about it. You guys haven't had a chance to actually see it yet, so I'm sure a lot of the talk around the league, around national media, all that stuff will be about what Ashton Jeanty does in that game if he does indeed suit up, which I'd be shocked if not. Like, he's a rookie. Again, got to get him those hits. Also, sticking with offense, Dante Thornton Jr. and Jack Besh. Look, Dante didn't practice much on Tuesday, and I don't even actually remember him taking any reps in team drills. I talked about this in the podcast yesterday. I did ask Pete about it after practice, and he said that Dante isn't hurting. They just slowed him down, which sounds to me like a guy who's going to get at least a quarter's worth of action in the preseason opener, even if they are counting on him is one of their top receivers out there. Also, second-round pick, Jack Besh as well. He has consistently worked with the twos throughout camp, and his game really started to shine once the pads came on. He got mixed in with Geno and some of the starters on Tuesday, so I think that we will see a heavy dosage of Jack in the first half of the game, and maybe longer. He's got to line up all over the formation as well. He's going to be a really fun guy to watch. Also, keep an eye for him on special teams as well. He's going to be, as what was it, Tanner Muse said a couple years ago, a special teams war daddy for the Raiders. So keep your eyes peeled for Jack Besh. Again, a really fun guy for me to watch as a former receiver, but just I think all of you guys are really going to enjoy his physical nature that he brings to the position. And speaking of receivers, we talk about a lot of them here on the podcast. Alex Bachman has been a real tough cover throughout camp, and he's shown great hands and route running as well. He's trying to land one of those final receiver spots on the active roster, and Pete has been really complimentary of him so far as well. And we're going to keep this whole thing going with the offense. Jackson Powers-Johnson is obviously another guy that I'll be keeping tabs on. He's been kind of moving around. He's competing for a spot. So how long does he actually play? After being kicked over to the guard spot, once the team did decide to move forward with Jordan Meredith at center, Jackson really has hopped in that battle with Alex Kappa for the starting spot at right guard. Now, yesterday, Kappa was at practice in a ball cap. He didn't actually take part in practice, but I think he plays, even though he is a vet. I think he was just kind of getting the day off, but I think he'll be out there. And for me, the interesting part about the two of them is going to be how long either one of them actually plays in the game, which could be very telling of what the coaching staff thinks of them. And just as an aside on that, the offensive line as a whole is something I'm really looking forward to. Jason Horowitz talked about it on the podcast the other day when we had him on as well. He wants to see what they can do, specifically the interior of the offensive line. We're pretty confident in what Colton Miller's going to give us. I think last year was probably one of his worst years of his career. He would admit that. I think that's an outlier. I think we start to see the Colton that we've seen in years past, and I think this offensive line, again, is going to be much improved overall. DJ Glaze has been pretty solid for the most part. For me, some of the questions are going to be on the interior of that offensive line. How does Dylan Parham look in pass coverage? coverage. Again, Jordan Meredith now playing center for the first time in the league with this team. To the right of him, Jackson Powers-Johnson. So in particular, I really want to see those guys open up some lanes for the running backs, give them room to run. We saw a lot of times last year, guys were getting hit in the backfield right as they touched the rock. That is tough to do and tough to pick up any yards when that's happening. So build off of it. Don't be the worst rushing team in the league from last year that we saw, in terms of yards per game. So definitely looking forward to seeing, what those guys do up front in terms of opening holes for our next guy that we're going to be talking about here, Zamir White. I've said it multiple times. He just looks like a different dude, and I think he's going to get a lot of work in Seattle. He looks lighter. He looks quicker. He's still just as strong. He's got good burst. He's impressed me and a lot of other media members throughout training camp thus far. And now you guys are going to get your first chance to really see what he can do. And, I'll be honest, I think a lot of people will also like what they see from him as well once he does suit up in this one. And maybe he's going to be a talking point for a lot of people after the game that hey, is Zeus back? So I'm real curious to see what he does with however many carries he does indeed get. That's a really crowded running back room, but there's some really interesting and intriguing guys in there. And as we close out things with the offense, we talked about these two guys more in the tail end of our last podcast, but we're going to be seeing a ton of Cam Miller and his former college adversary as well, Tommy Mellott. Miller said that he's kind of a rhythm player, so he'll get plenty of looks this time around to show what he can do, because usually he's only gotten a series or two here and there, at practice and things like that. So he's going to get a lot more role, and we'll see what that rhythm looks like for him. I've been impressed in the limited action what he has shown us, and as the weeks have gone on, he's looked more and more comfortable. Then there's Tommy Mellott. He's making the transition from quarterback to receiver. He has all the athleticism in the world, but he does seem like a development project to stash on the practice squad, for years down the road. I would love to see him make some splash plays. He is, the Walter Payton Award winner from last year as well, which is basically the Heisman, of that level of play there for those guys. So, he's got all the talent in the world. The guy did a ton. I dove into his stats in the last podcast. It's off the charts. So keep an eye on him. As I said, haven't seen a ton from him so far, but this could be a big opportunity for him. So now let's dive into the defense. After practice on Tuesday, J.J. Pegues, their pick out of Ole Miss, had this to say. He said, "I haven't hit a quarterback in a long time. How can you not watch out for that guy?" After saying something like that. He was saying he's ready. You can't hit the quarterbacks in practice and all that stuff. So he is definitely ready to lay the wood. But also don't forget about Tonka Hemingway either. Those two could be counted on as rotational guys along the defensive line, much later on down the road, but still worth keeping an eye on for sure. And I mentioned laying the wood. Can't not talk about JT Woods. He is a guy that I'm really excited to see in an actual game situation. It's clear that he is ready to hit somebody because he's brought a lot of physicality to that corner position and really could crack some skulls. So he's a guy that's going to probably make some splash plays. I think some people will be talking about him after the game. Former safety has now played exclusively at corner for the Raiders since coming here. Pete's liked what he's seen. So big chance for him to make some noise too. And also Greedy Vance. He's a guy that's played some good ball at times, gotten his hands on some passes here and there, a couple PBUs, things like that. So keep an eye out for Greedy Vance. I think he could pop a bit as well. Then the linebackers, Tommy Eichenberg and Cody Lindenberg. Now they're both likely going to wear the green dots. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I would imagine they will on the second and third units. How they play while taking on those duties is going to be really interesting to watch for me. Also, Amari Gaynor is a guy that really impressed me, last offseason, and in the preseason and everything like that. I liked the athleticism that he brought to the position, but I haven't really seen a ton from him. So I think he'll probably get some good burn in this game. I really want to see what he can do, if he still looks like the guy that caught my eye in the previous offseason. So stay tuned to see what Amari Gaynor actually puts on tape out there. And then on the back end, we got to talk about the safeties. We talked some corner. So let's drive into the safeties now. Chris Smith II and Thomas Harper. I want to see both of them in action because the two of them are now competing for looks to be the first safety off the bench after Lonnie Johnson Jr.'s injury. That's going to be a critical position for this team because they're going to be in that big nickel a lot, I think, as the year rolls on. So one of those two guys really needs to step up and be able to take on that role. Also, too, we can't not mention Jamal Adams. He's going back to Seattle. He is a will linebacker, but former safety, all those things. So when he's in there, it is almost kind of like a nickel look. So he's going to be a guy that I bet people are going to be like, whoa, we forgot about Jamal Adams, even though he's been a big talking point, and anything we do on him does really well on social media. So very clearly he commands a lot of eyes and attention. So keep an eye on 33 out there. Coming off the edges, the will linebacker, he is fast, and I'm curious to see, even though Seattle's not playing any of their starters, it's going to be all their backups. I'm curious to see how they play against a guy like him, and I want to see what he does in coverage in that spot as well. It's technically a 4-3 base with him in there at the will, but again, given his history as a safety, you think he's going to be all right in coverage. So I want to see what he can do in that regard as well after he's battled some injuries and stuff. Let's see if he's still that guy that can get things done in coverage at times. And obviously we know we can hit, so let's see him do some of that as well. But another guy in terms of the safeties I'll be paying attention to is Trey Taylor. I think a lot of people forget, and Jason did bring this up, he won the Jen Thorpe Award a couple years ago at Air Force, so that's a guy that has a pedigree of being a real solid football player. We just haven't really seen him get a ton of action. He'll be there behind Isaiah Polamalu, so look, as long as everything goes well, we won't see a ton of Trey, but in the preseason, a very intriguing guy to watch, and he has played really well throughout camp. I've seen him flash a couple times, so it's going to be interesting to see all of those guys in general, but that is basically what I'm looking for once they hit the field for kickoff up there in Seattle. So make sure you come back to us, guys, after the game on Thursday. We'll see if I was right or wrong. We're going to jump back into the studio to break down what we actually saw out there on the field. I can't wait to talk about some real football. We don't have to sit up here and pull the whole Allen Iverson. We talk about practice type of thing. Like, I'm excited to just actually dive into a real game, even though it's a practice game. I know it doesn't count, but nonetheless, it's football. They're going to be tackling live, and that's always fun. So I can't wait to dive into it. But also, guys, if you are not subscribed to our newsletter, please check that out. Head to silverandblacksportsnetwork.com and subscribe to get that delivered right to your inbox every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday by 6 a.m. We'll dive deeper into the game on Friday's newsletter as well. That's where we're going to be able to get a lot more stats heavy. I can't always throw every stat in the world at you in this because it's just what I can fit up here, but at times we will get in deep into the stats in the podcast, but the newsletter lets me organize things a bit more. This at times becomes a brain dump. The newsletter is a much more organized, process there. And we're going to bring that organization to the pod as training camp, eventually ends and we get into the season where there's not as much wholesale to get into. But, definitely read the newsletter. I enjoy that. We enjoy putting that out for you guys. And again, it's just a much more organized, quick-hitting, and stats-driven thing as well. So it's a good one. But also, too, if you're not already subscribed to this podcast, I don't know what the heck you're doing. Make sure you subscribe to us. So many of you already have, over, I think, 1,300 and counting or something like that. A few Raiders fans out there have already subscribed, so that's been awesome. For those of you that are listening and watching, if you've liked what you've heard, hit us with a 5-star review and leave a comment as well, please. You guys have no idea how much that stuff helps. The comments have already been so awesome, and we are so appreciative of all of that. So please do keep those things coming. I really appreciate them, and it does really help us grow the brand big time. That's how this thing kind of gains momentum. And again, continue sharing our content, whether it's the newsletter, this podcast, my Twitter account, on Instagram, all those things. Make sure you're sharing that stuff with your friends too, because that really builds off the momentum and can turn this thing into a bit of a snowball effect where we can really grow and start cranking out more and more and more for you guys. But anyway, wanted to give you guys a little peek about what I'm thinking about as the game gets ready to kick off on Thursday night up there in Seattle. That's kind of my take. Like I said, can't wait to see what actually happens in a true game format. So anyway, guys, with that is going to do it for today's show. As always, thanks for watching and listening. And hey, look, we'll catch you after the game.